The Overwatch League. We've had a bunch of crazy games. We got to cover all the action. We got to talk about it here. My name is Connor Goopy Kanoopy Knutson. I'm joined by Brandon Thibbledork Padilla and Bradley Shy Guy Long. Our guest tonight, our Vancouver beat writer. So yeah, we're gonna start our week like we always do, or our show. We're gonna reset our watch. Bradley, you're the guest here. You've watched the show. You've been around. What have you been up to lately?
Oh, well, I mean, I have been busy covering the Vancouver Titans, and it's been a pretty good run for them so far in the Overwatch League, and it's been a pretty good run for me as well. I've been enjoying that a whole lot. Today, I spent catching up on all the games that I missed from this week because it is getting kind of ridiculous. We got 4 games a day over 4 days. It's a lot of Overwatch to digest in a short period of time. So I caught up on all things like that, and then sometime tomorrow I'll be recording an episode of my podcast, Reign Over Me, with our fellow Game Haus writer Norchetto, our Atlanta Reign expert. Should be a good time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I need to tune into that. I mean, Atlanta is kind of the team to watch right now. Of all the teams, they've really been like one of the most exciting teams for sure. So that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, they've been on a good run.
Yeah. Brandon, what have you been up to?
God, so much. Can I just start and say that there are like half the teams in the league are the team to watch right now for me. It makes life really hard. It makes life very, very difficult. I've had a busy couple weeks. You guys may have noticed I wasn't even here last week. It's because I was driving down the Grapevine back from Blizzard Arena in the snow, going about 25 miles an hour with a very panicky girlfriend in the passenger seat. So took my time, didn't die, made it home. Now I'm here. I will actually be out at Blizzard Arena again this Saturday and Sunday, I think, or this Friday and Saturday. My girlfriend has like a baby shower thing to go to, so she's just gonna like drop me off at daycare at Blizzard Arena. I'm gonna go do my thing and play with all the cool toys and then leave, which is great. That's like ideal. In the past 13 days, I have published 13 interviews for a combined total of like 26,000 words at this point. And I have one more. It's coming out maybe tomorrow. We'll see. I'm gonna get on it right after this, pretty much. It's a roundtable with some of the San Francisco Shock. It was Sinatra, Stryker, and Krusty, which was a very interesting conversation overall. Though I have to say the highlight for me was definitely How to Trash Talk 101 with the Outlaws, which was a thrilling conversation to have. And there were a bunch of good ones overall. I won't spend the whole time here checking them out individually, but you guys should by clicking on my author page, which I will link here in a minute. Also, Contenders is starting up across the world again. Australia just started yesterday. South America started today. The schedule this season is ridiculous because they're trying to figure out how to make everything fit between the Overwatch League games. So we're going to have some days where there are 3 regions in a day, and 2 of the regions are overlapping, and one of them is at 3 a.m. in the morning. And boy, howdy, it's my job to cover them all. So, yeah, very, very, very busy.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. I think I was looking at NA Contenders. It starts in maybe a couple weeks, and they're doing like a Monday, Wednesday rotation, which I think is a really cool idea. I like that they're stacking it to essentially what we're going to have Overwatch, every day of the week. If you're such an avid fan, you wanted to watch it every day, you could, which is cool. But for me personally, I've been doing a weekly top 10 plays list that I put out. Just, trying to pick through the, several great plays, and then letting Reddit tell me I picked the wrong ones. So that's what I've been up to lately, just living in that world. I've had an interview with Jane that I've been transcribing. It's very long and it's taking me forever. So that will be out in, part 1 of it will be out, the part where we talk about Dallas. And then I'm going to do a separate part where we talk about Elo Hell and the T2 scene that I'll put out at a later date. But that's really great. So honestly, just been enjoying the Overwatch League, and especially this past week, it's been crazy. I mean, any power rankings from preseason, there cannot be. If there were like a March Madness, they see how long March Madness brackets can last before the first pick has been, foiled. I would wager that there are 0 pick'ems out there that have all these picks correct. I could be wrong, but there's no chance. It's been madness.
I think everyone. I mean, just to look at one team, and we'll go over this in a little more depth here in a minute, just to look at one team, how about the LA Valiant, right?
Yeah.
Nobody, like some people had the Valiant pretty low. No one had them at whatever they are right now, 18, 19. Nobody had them that low. And yet, after 2 weeks, here we are. So, yeah, no, I agree. I don't think anybody, maybe some, like a couple picks, a handful of them are looking right, at this exact moment. But who knows how those will change over the course of the stage, right?
Yeah.
Like, this has been chaotic in the extreme. Like, we thought the beginning of season 1 was bad because the league hadn't existed. And we were like, I don't really know where to rank any of these teams because half of them didn't exist in this way 3 months ago. But this is somehow worse, which is fun, but man.
I mean, it definitely is worse because, I mean, if you think back to last year, even pretty early on, I feel like most of the league kind of settled out towards the top and the bottom. You had NYXL immediately establish themselves as like the best team in the league by far. You had the Shanghai Dragons and Florida Mayhem dropping all the way to the bottom very early on. And, there was a middle of, 7, 8 teams, but this year it seems like we've got 15 teams in the middle. It's just absurd.
Yeah, I think it's pretty understandable that 5 through 15 or 16, a case could be made for any team. Because, I mean, you have the Gladiators tied with the Uprising for 14th, and we have the Chengdu Hunters at 7th. So, riddle me that, Overwatch League, riddle me that.
There are 9 teams with 2 wins right now.
Yeah.
9 teams.
Bananas. So, with all this chaos to sort through, we need to try and make sense of it a little bit. So I thought to start doing that, I thought we could look at our kind of our team of the week for week 2. Which team we feel like has some storylines attached to it that we may need to address. Either had really good weeks, really bad weeks. For one of our examples, a historic week. Just kind of talking about their matches as well. So, Brandon, I'll kind of let you start us off with this one. Who are your team of the week or teams for week 2?
Well, I would be remiss in my fandom if I did not talk about Dallas this week. Recap for another Reset Your Watch Point. I joined the Discord mod team for the Dallas Fuel, which was,
very nice.
It's been fun and very busy. So I got to talk about Dallas because they had another interesting week that I really hope they stop repeating. I really don't like the get swept and then realize that kind of sucks. They shouldn't do that anymore and then go win. Like they should just skip to the win part, like that's kind of the mind that I have right now. But at least they got the win they got because man, I published that Carpe interview and that kind of exploded everywhere. And then Dallas lived up to the hype and freaking 3-1 to Philadelphia after getting 4-0'd by the Guangzhou Charge, which I think is going to happen a fair bit with the teams Guangzhou's coming up against. They, in general, have a very interesting style. The fact that they were as close as they were to Vancouver, who I believe are far and away the best team in the league right now, it says a lot. It says a lot. I'm not just saying that because Shy Guy's here. I'm not. Yeah, they're honestly so good.
Pandering.
Yeah. And it's so satisfying because I was a big Runaway fan. So that's been nice to see. But I think Guangzhou in general will really challenge a lot of teams and really throw a lot of teams off. It was kind of interesting that the 2 teams that they faced so far, or 2 of the 3? How are we looking? Yeah, 2 of the 3 teams they faced so far are teams that are really going to give them a challenge because Chengdu plays the same sort of like we don't believe in the meta style that they do. And then Vancouver is just so good. And they were both insanely close games for very different reasons. So Dallas, team of the week because they backed up the trash talk. Very excited as a Dallas fan. Guangzhou as a team that I think will really, really, really throw a wrench in the plans of just about any team they're facing for the rest of the stage, at least. So those are mine.
Guangzhou is perhaps the team that, to me at least, kind of improved the most from week 1 to week 2, at least in my estimation of them. They came out and they looked really kind of sloppy against Chengdu. That whole match was really, really chaotic with the kind of crazy compositions that both of those teams like to run. And it was hard to get a beat on them after 1 week. But they really, really came out strong in week 2 where a saving Janu Diva Bomb from upsetting Vancouver and kind of throwing the league even into more disarray than it is already in. So they were hyper impressive to me, even though they come away 1-1 this week. They looked incredibly strong, and they have such a unique kind of style. They are, in my estimation, one of the most flexible teams in the entire league right now.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Any
really
team
great.
with Kib on it is going to be in that contention for sure.
Yeah.
And their strength of schedule is honestly not terrible coming up for the rest of the stage here. They have Florida on Thursday, the Valiant on Sunday, and then the Gladiators the Saturday after that. So, yes, the Gladiators are looking really good. That's probably their toughest challenge out of the three, maybe. The Valiant look good, but haven't quite followed it up, which, again, we'll talk about. But I don't think Florida really is going to give them much challenge.
No.
I think you need a little more coordination than what Florida can bring to the table. Valiant and Gladiators might be a little more challenging, but overall, they're looking at a playoff push. Honestly,
yeah, it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
One thing to note, a weird kind of schedule quirk with them is that they, in the last week of this stage, they have a rematch with Vancouver. So if that is anything like the first time around, that will be a heck of a game to watch to kind of close out the stage.
Yeah.
I wonder which play style will be figured out by the end of the stage. Vancouver's really good 3-3, or Guangzhou and Chengdu's ridiculous quad DPS, we don't care sort of comp. Which one of those will the teams in the Overwatch League be able to beat in the next 3 weeks? There's a question.
That's very true. One of those two teams, I believe, also, Shy Guy, is your team of the week. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about Vancouver this week?
We are going to deep dive into Vancouver here. So we already touched on it a little bit. They had a crazy kind of tough week this week, actually, with back-to-back games on Saturday and then Sunday night up against Guangzhou and then San Francisco, who, I mean, a lot of people are pegging as maybe the most talented team in the entire league, just in terms of individual players up and down this roster. And Vancouver did just about as well as you really could have hoped for. The Guangzhou game was a lot closer than people might have expected going into it. But that was, I think, in large part in credit to Guangzhou for the things that they did to disrupt Vancouver and their comfortability on 3-3. They were playing Eileen on Sombra a lot, and he was absolutely massive for them on that hero. Plus, they flashed just a much improved 3-3 comp this week. So, Guangzhou really came out strong, but Vancouver just has this innate ability to clutch when the cards are down on this team. And it goes back to their time as Runaway. And it seems to have actually carried over to the Titans, which, is something that I think people were a little worried about going into the season. How would they handle this transition? And so far, they have handled it beautifully. I mean, as good as anyone could have predicted for them. And the clutch plays that they're getting at the ends of matches is really just a testament to kind of their experience overall. That's before we even touch on the San Francisco game, which to me was probably the best single matchup we've had the entire season.
Yeah, I agree, and that plays to your point. I mean, they were clutching team fights. It may not have been the final team fight of the game, but they were doing that in the San Francisco game that pushed a really close match, just way in Vancouver's direction. It seemed like at crunch time, it seems like we're seeing the newer Runaway rather than the older Runaway, because the older Runaway may have gotten second place in a lot of those games. Monty and Doe went back and forth on this on the broadcast, where Monty's like, well, I have an old memory and I remember the old, Runaway and not clutch. And I think we're seeing the new Runaway.
Yeah, well, I mean, if anyone here remembers the old Runaway, it's the guy wearing the Runaway sweatshirt right now. But yeah, I definitely remember back to, their Apex Season 2 days. But you got to remember that this is a completely different team than that group of players. The only ones who remain are Stitch, Haksal, and Bumper, who is now playing a completely different role than what he did at the time. So, they are still have the same kind of DNA in some respects, but this team is much more than what that very first iteration of Runaway was, especially in terms of their team play at this point. they seem to be almost a hive mind when it comes to playing goats.
Yeah,
which is what makes them so good.
Yeah. And this got touched on a lot. Johnny's bomb was extremely impressive to end the game. He had several of them against San Francisco as well, netting 3 or 4 kills. And it's almost like the community, especially those who love Runaway and Vancouver, were like backing up Bumper. They're like, well, that was actually Bumper making that play. And it's just like they're so on the same page that you almost can't credit one or the other with these big plays. It's such a team effort,
Yeah, there's been a lot of critique of that sort. It's like, don't just talk about the bomb, talk about the boop that set it up, or the shatter, or the charge, and those are all very true. But they're also so hard to spot, especially in the moment as a caster who's trying to focus on many, many things. Shy Guy and I have that sort of experience. Like, you don't just pick that out necessarily. Sometimes you catch it and you're very lucky and you call it out and everyone's like, oh yeah, great casting, way to go. But like half the time, dude, you miss those. And you go back and you review and you go, oh my God, they freaking did like 4 different things to make that happen all at once in an instant. And for them to be able to coordinate that is really something. This team with its clutch factor, its coordination, and insane level of individual mechanical skill reminds me of last season's London Spitfire. And look what happened to them. Look where they ended up at the end of the season. This is good if you're a Vancouver fan. This is exciting and great, because if they can maintain that and avoid like the Spitfire stage 3, you're in a good spot.
Yeah,
certainly. And I'll say one last thing on Vancouver before we move on, and that is on the topic of Bumper. I mean, he has obviously been one of the best main tanks in the league so far this season. They flashed his Reinhardt stats on the screen last night, and he was first or second in nearly every category of Reinhardt stats. And it was just disgusting how well that team is playing around him, because the reason he has those insane stats is that they pump so many resources into keeping him alive at all times. Like, he is, more so than I think any main tank in the league, kind of the centerpiece of that team in terms of the way they play. It all comes down to the resources they give him to set him up for success. And, so far it has worked wonders. We'll see as the stage carries on if teams can start to kind of figure that out and maybe punish that play just a little bit going forward.
Yeah. And so kind of to close out, I'm going to talk about a couple teams. We can't finish this conversation without talking about a certain Shanghai Dragons team who just got their first win in franchise history. They are now at a very impressive 1-42 as a franchise. Just kidding. This is not to belittle the Shanghai Dragons. It's actually a really incredible moment. I wasn't at the arena, stuck here in Texas, but the emotion and just the electricity of that room and in that moment for all of Overwatch League, whether you were there or not, was just unprecedented and incredible. And I think we'll all look back and remember that moment from the season, even once it's long gone. But it was such a great and dramatic, event too for them, because they're playing Gamsu, their main tank, who was traded to them or sold to them, basically, transaction, whatever, from Boston just days before the season started. Boston is at playing without their main tank Fusions because of 2-way contract issues. There's just all of these dramatic storylines knitted into both teams, and it comes into this crazy historic game. So in the end, you can't take anything away from the Dragons for winning this. I think there are people out here trying to squander their win because of the Fusions being out, but this is just simply too big of a moment for the Dragons and for the league. The players on the Dragons, you can't belittle Gigery's crying off to the side of the stage because Fusions wasn't up there. Like, there's just no way you can do that in any fair or logical way. So, crazy awesome moment for Shanghai. One other team I just want to touch on really quick, mainly because I'm becoming a big fan, is Chengdu. I always say it wrong. This team is somehow good right now. They're crazy, and they have the best wrecking ball in the world, it seems like, in a Meng. He just plays it all the time, and it works like a lot of the time. It's even when it shouldn't. This team has been winning. They got, I think we're seeing what can happen if a team scouts them and what Seoul was able to do to them in that matchup. But, in their game against the Mayhem and their previous games, they've been doing fine. So this will be a team that's interesting to watch. We talked about, earlier, what'll get figured out first. Will this get figured out first, or goats? If a lot of teams are able to figure out Chengdu, this could be really bad really fast for them. I'm optimistic personally. I think they are unpredictable enough and kind of on the fly enough to keep making it work, but it'll definitely be an interesting team to watch moving forward. And it's just exciting Overwatch. When we've been watching goats for like a ton of contenders and a lot of stage one, it's so refreshing just to see something new at the end of the day. Like, it's just that simple. So I think they'll win a lot of fans' hearts just the way they're playing in general. And you got to love Bacon Jack and, Late Young making saying he wants to see the world, see China again. There's just a lot of really cool stuff with Chengdu to start for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that Shanghai got their first win this week. This season, we've kind of got Chengdu being the team that is kind of carrying the mantle for Chinese Overwatch as it is. And to see them come out and have this kind of success after what happened last year with Shanghai, I feel really good for them. Like, I think it is well deserved. China has a lot of talent, and people were skeptical and still somewhat are about Chengdu. But I'm very happy to see them, making it work with a really untraditional style, proving that you don't necessarily have to stick to the meta 100% to be successful.
Totally agree.
I think what's good about Chengdu's chances later in the season, because I do think they will be figured out here pretty soon. I think people are going to get tired of getting dunked on by a wrecking ball all game and try and figure out a good counter for it, which will be interesting, and counterplay is great. I don't think it'll be very good for Chengdu in particular when they start getting figured out. But they've got some like baked in wild cards whenever Jishiren and Yang Xiaolong get their visa issues sorted. Short of even having to sign anybody new, they're going to have 2 new faces rolling in at some point, whenever. And as soon as they get those guys integrated, that's another thing that teams have to prep for, that they have never gotten the chance to prep for, which is very, very valuable in this game. So they might, if people can figure out Wrecking Ball hit very hard, we should stop him. If they can figure that out, all well and good for them for the meantime. But as soon as 2 new players show up for Chengdu, 2 quite good players at that, we're in for an interesting ride. I'm just happy to see that they're not dead last, because everybody seemed to peg them in that bottom 3. So for them to run 7th off of, and with some insanely close games that could easily have them top 5, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
that feels all right.
I totally agree. And so kind of, we're on the topic of some of these lower seeded teams. That's going to lead us right into our next segment we're going to do. We're going to do a new segment on WatchHaus called Aggro versus Control. This is nothing copied from Attack or Defend from the Watchpoint show. Totally unique. So what we're going to do is we're going to present a topic, and we're going to open up chat for these as well. If you guys have any, statements, you'll see some examples of some here in a second. Feel free to throw them in the chat. But we're going to do something, and we're either going to, go aggro with it at that idea, that we're going to move forward with it quickly. We agree, like, yeah, let's do that. Awesome. It's good. All good. Or we're going to control, maybe back off a little bit, hold our cards a little closer to our hand. Let's wait a little bit to see how this plays out, kind of a thing. So that's what we're going to be doing. So the first one up is that Janu is the current front runner for MVP. Aggro or control? Bradley, what do you think?
This has to be like the hardest of aggros for me right now. I think if you watched last night's game against San Francisco, it's hard to come away with any conclusion other than that Janu was, the best player in the server last night. He was an absolute monster. I think over over the course of the series, I believe he ate 5 of Sinatra's Graviton surges. I went back and counted that today, and it's just like ridiculous how consistent he is, especially considering, people before the season were somewhat, worried about Diva's place. I think those concerns were obviously unfounded at this point in time. But to be able to do that, despite the nerfs that Defense Matrix got before the season, to have that impact is absolutely disgusting. And then obviously the bombs themselves were crazy time and again. He did so much to save them. I mean, the play at the end of the Guangzhou game in particular to close out that series was just, insanely clutch.
Okay. Is this my turn now?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say control, man. Control. Pump the brakes. Let's take 15 to 20% off this deal right now. Because, yes, Jonnu is playing at an MVP level. Undisputable. I have been a Jonnu fan since the days, and he is so good. But there are so many of those right now, which is making for some great Overwatch, but also making for a very difficult MVP conversation this early in the stage. I want to see, if we want to talk about players who are clearly the best one out of the 12 on the field, let's talk about Nene first from NYXL, who is like breaking the stats guy's brain right now. Poor Captain Planet over there is trying to figure out how to make a bar graph that can actually show Nene's stats versus the rest of everybody. I think he's a big reason that Houston no longer exists. Like there's just a crater. Like
F's in the chat for Houston.
It feels so bad. As a person who enjoys speaking with the Houston Outlaws when they're happy, boy, let me tell you, they ain't happy right now. So Nene is a big reason for that. F's in chat, thank you. I think we can also talk about Ivy from the Toronto Defiant, who has been a fairly important force in keeping the Defiant in the not sucking category, which they very well could have spent their first weeks in without Neko or anybody else. Ivy and Envy both actually had great days, but they're, another on the list. You could talk about DeFran because he's DeFran. Yeah. I love that guy. If Dallas understand his value, I think AKM could be that guy. I think after this week, I don't see AKM not starting over Effect. Let's put it that way. They might still try and go back and forth. I think it'll be a pretty clear corollary between AKM starts, we're winning the map. Maybe we should start him more. And if he can do that consistently against bigger teams, he could easily enter that conversation too. So yes, Jonnu is godly and I love him to death so much. So much. But there are a few MVP candidates, I think, at this stage, and a couple more might show themselves by the time we get out of here.
Yeah, I think this is a tough discussion on so many levels because of the nature of GOATs. The 3-3 meta just doesn't really give standout players a chance to stand out besides the Zaryas, who are dealing insane amounts of damage like Nene and Ivy. So for the time...
Or Carpe freaking popping out on Widowmaker for 2 seconds, getting a 3K, true. And then just floating back to spawn. Still lost, by the way.
Yep.
But I totally agree.
Yeah, so it's tough for me. I would aggro this, but really gently, like a very slow aggro. Only with contenders for me being Meko and Nene right now. It's a really similar conversation for me with Meko because they're both doing a lot the same thing. They have a solid main tank and Lucio that are helping them with their bombs, and they're eating a lot of grabs each, and they're both contributing a lot on the Diva. I think Meko's flexing on Sombra has been really impressive as well. But there are a lot of players, I think we'll have to kind of wait and see, we'll have to wait and see, some of these support players. If Jonat can win at season 1, who's to say Masa or Cruz or someone like that couldn't win it for season 2? I don't know.
Shu from Guangzhou.
Oh yeah,
we're talking
really
about
impressive.
Yeah, maybe RCK hasn't been god tier, but he's been pretty solid on Sombra for supposedly a Diva 1 trick, much like Meko.
Yeah.
Although I will definitely say Meko has been better statistically and in terms of performance for his team, it's far and away. You could talk about Ding from Shanghai, who had a once in a lifetime game on Sombra, something like 190 people hacked over the course of the series, which shouldn't ever happen.
He's already most improved because his game 1 against Chengdu was horrible. I mean, he Pharaoh ulted a wrecking ball who just rolled around the corner on Horizon, and it was one of the funniest moments of my life watching.
Just nerves. So many of these you can see the nerves. A lot of times we'll talk about it maybe they were nervous. Some of these, dude, you could tell. Dallas's game 1, for instance, you could tell. So yeah,
Yeah.
there were a lot of those, and I'm excited to see how those start going once they get over those nerves and just remember to click heads and press Q. Like, ooh.
Yeah, it's true. So moving on to the next one. This one is a tough one because right now in the standings, I'm going to pull it up just so I'm making sure I'm right here. But the Los Angeles Valiant are in 20th, and the Houston Outlaws are in 19th, going off of match and map differential, putting those at the bottom. Even though Florida or Washington has 0 wins, they're still above Houston because they only played 2 games. With those things in mind, the LA Valiant and the Houston Outlaws will not make the playoffs. Oof. Brandon, what do you think?
Aggro, man. Aggro. Push that point, dude. I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. I think they can definitely come back and start winning games. I think the Valiant could beat Guangzhou. It'll still be close. I think they can do it. But in general, the race is so tight right now. And starting at a deficit like this after the first 2 weeks is they have to be perfect, right? Like we're already at that point in the stage where you need to knock down everybody in your way to make playoffs. And I don't think they will. I just don't. They will definitely start improving. There's nowhere to go but up for these guys. And the Valiant are already doing well. They're just losing really close games to really strong teams. I think they should be in a power ranking sense. The Valiant are higher than their standings are for me.
Yeah,
but still not strong enough, I think, to overcome the teams they're facing with the things they're trying. I don't think Cookie's that great of a main support just yet. He's good, but not good enough. And I think if what we saw was true, and they're not playing Custa because Custa's understanding of goats is too good, I think you've taken yourself to in and out in that sense. I don't understand. I don't get that at all. I don't know if that's necessarily 100%, but it's what I've been hearing from a couple different people on Twitter and so on and so forth. So the Valiant need to figure that out, because if they don't, they're in a dangerous slide. As it stands, they could bring it back, win a few games, maybe or maybe not make playoffs, but I'm going to lean towards no. The Outlaws as well, they're struggling. They're frustrated. That can turn into great energy and great momentum for some wins, but it could also make them really struggle. And their support lineup is still kind of struggling on its own.
Yeah.
Their compositional decisions are a little weird sometimes. Like, I just don't see it.
Yeah, it's so tough to watch with the Outlaws because so many of their plays are genius when they pull them off. Like the rotation on Anubis has been really good. They play control maps really well, really smart tactics. It seems like they're really good in the neutral. Like when there's no ults, they can win that first fight a lot of times. But it's when they get point or get the payload moving, they just seem to kind of freak out and not have a plan. But I'm actually gonna say control on this. I think that it's just too early to say for these two teams that they're not going to, based on their last season's success. The Valiant, I mean, were division champs. They were the best in their division. They didn't make any changes, except for losing Soon and Neko, basically. So, this will be interesting to watch. I think it's tough. I mean, for the Valiant, I think they have a lot of the talent on the team. They have possibly the best off tank in the world in space. They have good players. I think they're more a higher ceiling team than Houston is. For them, it'll be interesting what the schedule plays out. We can maybe talk about that more here in a second, but they're going to be one I think could do it. If Houston gets in, I think it will be because of their schedule, because they get teams like Florida twice. We can look ahead, but they get Paris in stages 3 and 4, which by that time we're probably thinking goats will be gone. If it's still here in June, I think we'll all lose our minds. So yeah, it's just tough. I think you made a good point, Brandon. I think the energy for Houston could either be a really big detriment. If Jake is clearly passionate, that team is full of passion and fervor to do well. It's if they can drive that into success, or if Dante, being a new player, having joined a terrible team, starts to get a little toxic, starts to get a little like, I don't know about this whole thing. I could see some issues coming up with that, and them tilting a little bit, but it's a tough one for sure. I just can't quite say yet that they'll both be out. But Bradley, what do you think?
Yeah, I think on this one I'm gonna have to give it a soft aggro. Just I in my heart kind of believe this to be true because like you said, you mentioned the schedules there a little bit, and if you look at what Valiant has for the rest of the stage next week, games against Vancouver and Guangzhou, close out in week 4 with games against Philly and Houston. So I think that Houston game could actually wind up being really huge for them, in particular, because I don't think you could say they are favorites to win any of their other games for the rest of the stage. And if you close out stage 1 with 0 wins,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be impossible to make playoffs at that point. Like, maybe you can go on a crazy run and sneak into one of the wild card spots and fight your way through the tournament. And
That would be their only chance, yeah.
And like LA is a dangerous team to do something like that because they still have such a solid core. Like when you think about a tank line of Fate and Space, that should, in theory, be one of the best in the league. But just so far this season, I don't think like the rest of the team has really been there. They just look really out of sorts for the most part, and they're coming so close to wins a lot of the time. But it's just like these small things that are really sinking them at the moment.
Yeah.
Houston, to me, just looks like a train wreck, kind of. Like, they can't play goats at a high level at all. And they haven't gone full-blown into trying to play the Sombra and the weird stuff yet, which is where they've had their most success. So,
yeah.
It's hard.
Put Jake on Bastion.
It's just tough because Houston's lost 2 Game 5s that were so close. Granted, they were train wrecks. And then they lose to New York when they're playing perfect Overwatch, it seems like. New York did everything right that match.
Yeah.
I think they beat anyone.
Right.
But it just happened to be Houston who's okay, and they got absolutely trounced. So
yeah, it's rough to say with Houston, much like even with Guangzhou in a couple of their games, right? Like a single team fight decides if you're 2-1 or 1-2. Which is an insane gap right now. And with 28 games in a whole season, every single one of them counts. So these map 5 situations, they're really kicking you, but you don't have time to put an asterisk on it and say they're good, except they're losing in map 5. Because if you're losing in map 5, you're done. You've lost. There's no going back.
That was the story for Houston last year. Like they had a very solid like map differential. They were a couple of maps going the opposite direction from making playoffs and potentially keeping Philly from even making in the first place.
Yeah. Couple Route 66s, man.
Thoroughly average. We are entering another era of thoroughly average. The Outlaws are looking like the Dallas Cowboys of the Overwatch League, except they don't have 5 rings.
Oof.
So,
Oof.
Yeah.
Big oof.
And I'm saying that as a Niners fan. So
does that make Jake Tony Romo?
Oh,
he's gonna be faster eventually.
Actually, incredible comparison.
Yeah, no, yes,
brilliant.
Oh man,
wow,
that makes Spree Ezekiel Elliott. Nobody knows these references. Moving on.
Anyway, I threw a spicy one in here. We haven't looked over this or planned it, so I'm just gonna throw it out here. We'll talk about it. I think it's interesting. We've kind of led into this discussion a little bit. Expansion teams will finish with a higher win percentage than returning teams on average. So this is averaging all the expansion teams, all the returning teams, win percentage for both. Which do we say is higher? Because it's been talked about so far how good these expansion teams are doing against Overwatch League teams. I think they have like a 70% win percentage or something. It's crazy. So what do you guys think? Bradley, I'll give this to you first. I know you haven't had maybe any time to prep this answer.
Put me on the spot with this one. This is a really, really tough question because I think to an extent myself and nearly everyone coming into this season kind of massively seems to have underrated the expansion teams as a whole. I mean, if you look at the standings right now, I think like 6 of the top 10 are expansion teams. 5
of the top 8, 6 of the top 10 expansion.
Crazy. Never would have seen that coming. I did not expect to see teams like Chengdu, Toronto, even Atlanta anywhere near this high early in the season. And the fact that they are already there makes me really, really optimistic that it will stay that way. But I'm also worried that it's in part just kind of meta dependent at this point. I think most of the expansion teams coming in have got players who have been playing goats for months and months and months now. And so far that has, put them at somewhat of an advantage going into the season. I wonder if that will equalize. But if I got to go one way or the other, I'm going to go aggro on this one. I think they have shown enough so far early in the season that I think these expansion teams are going to be able to carry it through.
All right. Brandon, you're thinking deeply. What do you think here?
I've been trying. Thanks for making him go first, because that gave me time to formulate an answer here.
Thanks, Bradley.
First off, this is statistically a poor question to ask, because there are 12 old teams and 8 new ones. So we're looking at a bit of a misbalancing there. I think despite that, it will be very, very close. What the sticking point is going to be not the players, but the coaches. I think the meta is going to shift. This new hero that we'll talk about here in a bit, and potentially another new hero, which I may be hearing about. Maybe my voice doesn't go that high.
Leaks.
Yeah. We'll get there. We'll get there. New things will happen. Patches will happen. Reaper will be given another 20% to his lifesteal. It's just the way of things, right? Yeah. That's just how it's going to go. So these players will need to adapt into a meta that they hadn't played in contenders, that they didn't play last season of the Overwatch League, this, that, and the other. We saw last season the meta makes and breaks teams, right? Dallas till stage 4, Boston in stage 3, right? The meta decides to a great degree, on top of strength of schedule and map pool and personal issues and everything like that. Those are all factors that decide your performance, not just how good you are at GOATs. It's kind of what it is right now, but that will change, So these teams, one, good on them if they have deep and flexible hero pools, which many of the expansion teams do, but they also need really good coaches to make sure that they can handle that. I think Washington, I'll go back to Washington because we haven't talked about them all episode, and I'm the Washington guy now. I think their coaching staff will enable that team to at least surprise some people in a meta or two. I think Chengdu's coach, Rui, I think he's got the stuff. I think he was very good for Miraculous Youngster way back in the day. And obviously his tenure in Shanghai wasn't great, but I don't think Papa Jeff himself could have saved Shanghai last season if he had come in and started coaching. It's going to come down to staff and how well you can keep the ship steady, keep people adapting and learning and talking and staying together and not taking anyone to in and out and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be very, very close, basically, is my end point there. I don't really know if I can push or aggro or control on.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to externally process my way through this answer. So I'll say what I think at the end, because I think that meta and coaching staff are a huge part of it. I also think that this kind of gets at a deeper question between, what is the value of previous Overwatch League talent? We've talked about this a lot. What is the value of that? And maybe, those players who were in TF2 before migrating over, just these kind of long tenured Overwatch players versus some of these contenders players and newer talent coming into the league, whether that be from Korea or other regions, or just kind of, assembled from different, pieces. Which one of those is better? I think a lot of what the expansion teams have going for them is they have kind of this, they were playing this meta a lot competitively, where the Overwatch League teams from last season were off, not necessarily not practicing, but they weren't playing in these competitive kind of modes all the time on this meta. So I think that gives the expansion teams an edge early for sure. But I think that the previous teams, at least with a lot of returning players, will have experience in that they've been through this gauntlet before. They'll have the endurance, especially a team like Philly, who has proven that they can make the endurance thing work when it counts. I think those teams will have a huge advantage in stages 3 and 4. So it's kind of I think there's a chance the table could really flip after stage 2. Maybe we get a big meta shift like you were talking about. These players who have done it before are just kind of buckled in, ready to go. And we see some of these expansion teams maybe have some personality problems on their teams, maybe aren't able to, handle the long marathon of Watch League. So I don't know which of those two things is going to happen. I think that's oversimplifying it. Quite that simple to break down as well. If I had to go with a gut reaction, I think it's going to stay a lot the same. I think a few teams, especially in that like 6 to 14 range, are going to change a lot, and we'll see. Maybe the 11 through 14 or 15 will be a really close race to see who gets the playoffs. But I think by and large, the expansion teams will end the season with a higher win percentage than the returning teams, for me. So
I think that's fair.
Yeah, and I forget where I saw this the other day. I think it might have been one of the guys on Tactical Crouch talking about how, with such a young esport as Overwatch is, I mean, it seems like it's been around a long time in my head at this point, but it's really only been a couple of years, which means we are really finally starting to see the generation of players who like pretty much Overwatch was their game. Like this is how they came up. This is the game they've been grinding for a long time now, and I think you are starting to see that second generation overtake the first just a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a little change in the guard going on for sure. Well, I think we're going to see it a lot more in a year. I think there's some really good 15 to 17-year-old players right now.
Oh yeah, that's a whole huge discussion.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be really interesting not to watch them necessarily replace the old guard, but to watch them mix and see what they learn from the older players and what the older players learn from them, because these guys do not want to get pushed out or pushed around. And if we're still looking at expansion opportunities, and I mean, some of these rosters could be bigger than they are, like there's still some space. So I'm very interested to see how those combine, what sort of rosters we get with like grizzled veterans and then newbies, like Nene coming on to NYXL. For all his time spent with those players, in XL2 and the World Cup and everything, like he is very much a rookie in an old man's locker room. So it's good. It's been good to see him integrated in that way. And I mean, kind of replace half the DPS core in the process because he's just a really good Zarya. But yeah, that should be interesting for sure.
All right, and for this last one, for aggro versus control, I'm going to combine the last two we had planned into one. They're kind of similar questions anyway, just to get the show on the road a little bit. So I'm going to say, guard needs to start over bird ring 100% of the time right now, and AKM should be starting over effect at all times right now, 100% for both. Brandon, what do you got?
Go. Push. Aggro. Speed boost. Drop the sound barrier and the transcendence and the coalescence and the rally. Use it all. Oh my God. Just right now, I'll put the heavy asterisk of just for now, because I don't know what's going to happen, but at this moment, if guard is in, the Spitfire start winning. If AKM is in, the Fuel start winning. If you take them out, they might still win, but it's going to be a heck of a lot harder. So at this moment, with their performance and the meta right now, yes, 100%.
All right, Bradley, what about you? What do you think about that?
Okay, I'm gonna have to split down the middle on this one. I am aggro on guard. I think he needs to be in the lineup for the Spitfire. I'm not ready to 100% write off effect yet. When even in this meta, I do think AKM has been by far the better Zarya player, but I think there can be situations, certain maps, where you might want effects flexibility a little bit. I mean, AKM has shown some better stuff in terms of his flexibility this year, even picking up the Widowmaker at times and being much better on that than I think he was last year. But I think there are still going to be maps where you might want to run McCree or Tracer, and they have done that. They ran Tracer on Busan, I believe, in the Guangzhou game, and that's why effect was in to start that one. So I think there are places for effect. On the other side, guard just seems like a pure upgrade for the Spitfire, if only because it means they get to put Prophet on the carry DPS now. Like they get to throw him on Zarya, and I think that's what you want to be enabling if you're London, because he is your star DPS.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to go the other way on this. I'm going to. I think that this season, we talked about coaching earlier. We've talked about coaching a lot on this show, actually. I'm real big on coaching in Overwatch, if you guys can't tell. I think that coaching this season in the Overwatch League is going to change the way rosters have to operate. Last season, I'm not saying that coaching was bad or anything like that, but teams were able to run the same 6 players every week and get away with it. Scouting-wise, that should not happen. I think the league is at its best. You can be the best team possible, when you're rotating one or two pieces, making just slight adjustments, enough to where you keep synergy, but you're keeping the other team from scouting you just 100% on every map, what you're going to do. I think with the investment in coaching a lot of these teams have made, I mean, like Dallas's coaching staff is huge. Teams like Toronto have a Winston's lab analyst on their staff. There's going to be really good analysis done. So I think, maybe you could do it in stage one and get away with it. But I think even then it might start to get you a little bit. I think teams could scout out how guard plays. I mean, you can't scout out what Profit's doing right now and Zarya right now. It's just like too good. But I'm just not convinced. And also Birdring is just he's such a backbone and such a staple for this team at times. It just seems so tough to like out him so quickly when we just haven't seen that much of guard. Granted, what we've seen has been better. It's tough because you don't want to leave Birdring in and tank because he's Birdring, but you don't want to put guard in to me because we just don't know yet. He's just still a little unproven to me. So I think you could get away with both and probably do okay. I would be hesitant to do this for a long period of time because of the increased scouting and coaching that's going to be out there, and because I think Effect and Birdring are just too good to just warm the bench even this early. So I can see it going either way, though, honestly.
I think there's something to be said for occasionally sprinkling them in, both to keep people on their toes and because they are genuinely good players who will pop off if given the opportunity, right? I just think the percentage needs to change a little bit. Dallas are very map 1, AKM. Map 2, let's try Effect. No, that didn't work. AKM's back. Oh, that worked. Oh, all right, Effect is back. Like, yeah, there's a corollary here. You can see the data points. I know all that big, huge coaching staff has to be running these numbers, right? They have to understand that. So I think you just give Effect a little more time in scrims. You bring him out on like a really good Widow map or something like that, or a McCree map, like Busan, right? If you're going to run Busan and like have downtown and have to have some Widow duels and everything like that, bring him out. Because they were putting Zachary on Widowmaker on Busan this week, and
it's okay.
Yeah, right. Like,
but he's been in Brig Jail for so long that he might have forgotten how to play DPS. So
it's tough. It's tough to stay in that game, man. Especially going up against Happy, who is just popping off. Like, is so good. But there are tons of those. You need to bring out your best Widowmaker if you're going to commit to a Widow duel, right? So there are moments, absolutely, where Birdring, who was one of many MVP performers for the Spitfire, and Effect, who would have been had he stayed and had been healthy, actually, I should say that. Like, there are moments. Of course you start them. But overall, I think in general, you start guard and you start AKM right now.
Sure. That'll be a super interesting thing to keep an eye on as those two teams move forward. And then if there's any Effect has been clear about how he's for the team now. He just wants to be happy, and so he's not going to be concerned if he's not playing. I'd be interested to see how Birdring takes that. I'm not saying Birdring's like a needs to be in the spotlight kind of player or anything, but he's a big name in the league, so it'll be super interesting to watch.
And he had some troubles with kind of slumping a little bit last year, so I kind of wonder what does that do to him if he is just not playing for a stage or two at a time? Does that set him back a little bit? Does he need to be kind of in the rhythm of playing to really pop off? And I think that's another thing teams have to consider, because if you want to get value out of all the players on your roster, I don't think it serves you well to be benching them for like in long periods of time.
Yeah. To be fair, he was benched through stage 3 because of a wrist injury.
Yes,
is what I was pointing at, not like a metaphorical watch or anything. It was less to do with them like, you're not performing, we're going to kick you out of here. It was like, okay, you hurt your wrist. It's better, but we're going to be really careful about it, right? And they could do the same thing. Like, I'm sure they've got like physical therapy, and that's being handled much more effectively than it was. But at the same time, do you worry about that if you're the Spitfire? And do you go, hey, we're only going to play you one game a week, right? Or half a series if we only have one game, to really make sure we keep you healthy through this season. He was the only player who really had that problem, and it happened twice. So I tread on very thin ice if I'm the Spitfire with Birdring, because if you run him hard and put him away wet, it's gonna be bad. You don't want that to happen, because you will need him. There will be a time where you need Birdring. and he will be there if you make sure he can be there. So that's another factor I would think about.
Yeah, that's true. Well, guys, I think we've talked about week 2 quite a bit. I think we're at this point, to close out the show, I think we're ready to look ahead to week 3 and beyond. We're going to focus in on week 3 for right now and look at some of the matches we're each excited for. I think we've each picked a couple that we're going to talk through. So, Bradley, what are your matches coming up that you are excited for week 3?
So my first match for this week is Los Angeles Gladiators versus the London Spitfire. And there are a couple of reasons that I think this will be a particularly interesting matchup. The first is that we get a bit of a rematch from the playoffs. This was kind of the team that actually pushed London the most during the playoffs last year. They came out, swept them in their first series against them, and before London really caught fire and then just kind of tore through the rest of the playoffs. So I like that kind of rematch. But in particular, I think this is going to be kind of a turning point for both teams in terms of stage 1 in particular. Right now, both these teams are sitting in the middle of the pack, but have looked very solid. Gladiators have had a really tough schedule so far, and it shows. But I think this is an important game because if both these teams have designs of making stage playoffs, then I think they need this win. I don't think you can take 3 losses this early in the stage and expect to be making the playoffs at the end of it. So I think this is going to be very important for both of these teams to kind of finally settle out where they stand really in the league, because they've both been kind of up and down so far to an extent.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's been players on each team that we thought would be staples and really good that have been in question, in particular at the main tank position. I mean, Roar and Jester, there have been a lot of questions to me about those 2 players, who I was very high on both coming into the season. I think I drafted both in all my fantasy leagues and have since dropped them all because they're just not scoring points. And but yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of questions with these 2 teams in general outside of those 2 players that I think will start to get sorted out maybe with this matchup.
For sure.
And then the other game that I have on my radar this week is going to be NYXL versus the Seoul Dynasty. And this is interesting to me because I think this will be the toughest challenge that New York has faced so far. Yes, they are 4-0 right now. And I think they've done everything in their power to kind of reassert themselves as the best team in the league so far. But it hasn't always been the cleanest, and the competition hasn't been the best for them so far. So this, I think, is their toughest test to date, and that should give us a pretty good idea of what these 2 teams are really.
I agree. Yeah, that one's going to be interesting. I think Seoul has been one of the most polarizing teams to start, whereas XL has just been so consistent. They're starting off just like they did in season 1. But we just don't have a good read on Seoul. It's so hard to see what Seoul we're going to get when they come out and play. That will be definitely a very interesting matchup. I think Seoul will prepare for that game very hard. I think they always really want to give London and New York their best games. So definitely look for Seoul to come out absolutely giving them their best. I can easily see it going to a game 5. Probably leaning towards New York winning. But yeah, definitely those 2 games are huge. Brandon, what have you got for this week?
So I'm going to overlap on one of them at least, just by saying Shanghai's games in general are going to be pretty interesting to see. Let me pull them up here. So they obviously first win of the season. And just in general, I want to see if they can maintain that momentum or if they're going to struggle a little bit more before they really kick back into or get into, for the first time, being a normal team that wins and loses as normal. Their game against Chengdu will be very interesting from a compositional standpoint, that's for sure. In week 1, Gaguri was the number 1 wrecking ball in multiple categories. And since then, Ameng has come back and said, that's me. I do that. I'm good at that. So I'm very interested to see if they kind of swap that in, or if they try, now that they have Gamsu, to go for more traditional 3-3 styles, and if that works against Chengdu. So that game in general will be really cool. Plus it's a Chinese grudge match, in general, lots of cool storylines to watch there. Their game against the Dallas Fuel will also be very interesting because I'm a Dallas fan. let's see, who else? The Shock versus the Hangzhou Spark, I think will be the battle for electricity, as some people have been calling it. Is going to be a very interesting one, I think. Hangzhou had a bit of a struggle last week, losing to Houston, which nobody right now with any shame should be proud of. And then, just in general, kind of falling from the hype that they had generated in week one. Curious to see if they can bring that back. Curious to see if the Shock can maintain what for them as well is it's kind of a parallel story, right? Like they started off very strong, beating the crap out of Dallas, and now they kind of struggle. So let's see which one of those can kind of bring it back at this point. And then the last one for me is going to be Paris versus Atlanta, just because those are both really fun teams to watch right now. Some of the best 3-3 we've seen, some of the craziest tank play we've seen. Dufran is there. Like, it's going to be a good match. Really excited for it.
Yeah, I'm looking at oh, go ahead, Bradley. Sorry.
I was just going to say a quick thing on the Paris-Atlanta match. I think the team that comes out on top in that game is really kind of asserting themselves as one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league. Like that is the match that really decides a lot at the top of the standings right now.
I was about to make that same point. I think if it's close, you keep both those teams in like your top 6 or 7. Mm-hmm. If it's a blowout, you can promptly move one down, unless it's just a fluke kind of game. And if it's a blowout, you can move that winning team up to that conversation with New York and Vancouver, I think, for sure. Mm-hmm. But on that same note, I'm looking at entertainment value for these games. I've really liked just getting up and watching Overwatch League when it's not just mirror goats, no emotion, boring, using abilities, countering each other, blah, 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 blah. I love watching Atlanta because I love watching Dogman literally yell at the enemy team. He literally leans over and screams things at them, which I think is incredible. He starts chanting the crowd. Him and Dufran are always having a good time. Yes, more of that, please. As a sports fan and just an entertainment fan, please give me more of that. So I'm super pumped for any of Atlanta's games. In the same kind of vein, overlapping with Brandon, I'm pumped for Chengdu and Shanghai. That's just a game that's not going to look like the other games that you watch. And for that reason alone, I'm excited to watch it, just because I have no idea what I'll be tuning in to watch and no idea of the results. It's just going to be so unpredictable, a great time. And then a super interesting one, I think, and a lot of people will just write off this game because of the teams playing, but is actually Florida and Houston. This is a proving ground game for me because both of these teams are just getting dumped on right now by media and the rest of the league. I mean, preseason, we thought Florida was going to be horrible. They've actually looked slightly better than expected. I mean, still not great, granted. But, we thought Houston would be better maybe than they've started, and they've been terrible to start. So both of these teams should certainly want to win this game. Florida to prove that they're not just shambles and that their roster makes sense. Houston to prove that they're not, Jake's not pounding on the desk because he's bad. And to really, like we talked about earlier, channel that energy into a win and really do something with it. So, this is kind of a pillow fight because it might be close and not that highly tactical or skilled, but I still think it's a really important game, especially if these two teams want to make a playoff run. This is a must win. Already this early, I'd say it's a must win for either of these teams for playoff reasons. But yeah, a lot of great games next week overall.
Can we throw out a prediction on that one?
Yeah, go for it.
I've got some opinions about Florida versus Houston now that you bring it up. The pillow fight here.
Yeah.
I think Florida's going to get clapped, dude. I think Philly first off last week. So Florida beat Philly last week 2-1, right? I think Philly did all their prep for Dallas to try and back up the trash talk, and then we're just caught unawares by Florida doing anything but rolling over and dying, right? Thus,
plus,
still very close.
Yeah, and I mean, also they had Boombox out of the lineup. They were playing Elk off position with not a lot of notice. So
yeah, true. I think with all those factors, any other day, Philly still beats the crap out of Florida. Florida just got real lucky. Mm-hmm. They also lost 3-2 to Chengdu, which is not necessarily something to cry about, but they lost. They couldn't adapt enough. Swan had a pretty good pocket wrecking ball pick, which was nice, but not enough. Even bringing in Saya player in map 5 wasn't clutch enough to overcome Chengdu, which needs to be clutch enough to overcome Chengdu, really. Yeah. Houston, meanwhile, coming in with a victory against Hangzhou, which was supposedly a very strong team. They get clapped by an NYXL that could have beaten anybody with a game like that, as Connor mentioned. And now they're mad. Now they're just pissed off. I think Houston comes back and says there is no way, after getting swept by New York, that we lose to Florida. There is no way. Jake's probably spitting mad, flipping tires in a football field in the snow or something. Like they are going to throw everything. They are going to be like Last Jedi spoilers incoming. They're going to be like Kylo Ren when he sees Luke's hologram on the blood salt field. They're going to be like, I want every gun to fire on that team. That one right there. Except they're not a hologram. They're the Florida Mayhem, and they're going to die. They are going to be reduced to a paste, and it's going to be really funny to watch. My prediction.
All right, so basically what I'm getting from that is Houston is definitely the dark side, definitely the embodiment of Florida are Luke Skywalker. Who knew? They've already died and transcended. That's Florida this season. They're already dead. That's really the only way they're like Luke Skywalker. Anyway, that's too harsh. Florida, you're great. I'm sorry.
I like their graphics.
Best graphics in the league.
Shouts out to Antoine.
So we've talked about next week's games. Right before we close out the show, we just have to talk about a big announcement that happened minutes before the show started. We have a new hero. He's looking awesome. Bandage or bullet? What is it going to be?
If you're playing in my ELO, probably way more bullets, and then you die because he's not here.
If it's a Moira situation, it's all bullet, all orb, for sure. But yeah, super excited to see what this new hero is kind of all about. I'm like, so for some reason, I'm blanking on his name right now. That's why
Baptiste.
I haven't said it. There it is. Baptiste.
He is Haitian. He is really freaking cool looking. Everybody's making Demo Man from TF2 comparisons, and I get it. But Apex literally ripped off Lucio so hard that I feel we get one freebie, like just one. If they can make Lifeline be like Fem Lucio 2.0 with a robot, I think we can get Baptiste, who kind of looks like Demo Man. Not to mention he's awesome. Like his backstory seems super cool. I mean, tragic, but cool. And that's just one of them. So like, we'll see. Yeah. This is going to be very interesting.
What is this? One of them talks.
So right? I don't have anything really specific. I'm not going to drop like huge bomb news on this because I'm not that cool. But I've had more than one person whisper to me and be like, hey man, they're not done yet. So Baptiste is coming to PTR tomorrow. I'm going to predict. I'm not 100% on that, but I'm like 99% sure on that. Makes PTR sense. Tomorrow, live in 2 weeks probably, and then live in comp in another 2 weeks. Standard time frame for a new hero, right? It's what we've had for the past couple, which is fine. There's another hero that we've been kind of trying to like, when are they coming in? What's going on? And that's Echo. That's what we could get. There is also the potential that we talk about the other main character in the lore drop that we've been getting, which is Commander Cuerva, Baptiste's hunter, who could be a very interesting DPS hero, anything like that. There is potential that in an effort to break up the meta a little more in time for stage 2 or stage 3, that Blizzard does a double hero drop and really just shakes the toy box, you know, because that's what needs to happen, right? They need a real shot in the arm to say, hey, Goats is dead. We took it out back and gave it 2 new heroes, and now it's dead, and we've buried it. So it follows logically that they could do a double drop to really try and make that happen fast if they're actually concerned about Goats killing viewership for the Overwatch League or anything like that. I'm not super sure on that because that takes a lot of work, and we haven't seen anything about this second hero yet. You know, maybe they're waiting until right when Baptiste drops on PTR. You know, it's not outside of Blizzard's realm of possibility to do something like that. So I would keep an eye on it just in case. We'll see what happens. And if it does happen, I'm going to freak out. I'm going to be really excited. So keep an eye on that.
Definitely. Yeah, I think this will be interesting to see. Nate Nanzer, before the season started, talked about how he wanted Overwatch League to look like it does when you're playing on ladder. Like, he wants it to be a very similar experience, not disconnected with patches, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So in that line of thinking, I would think, you tweeted about this earlier, Brandon. I would think he would maybe try and get this out by stage 2. With the breaks in between. I mean, that's a good bit of time for them if they aggressively patch this, get it through the PTR, get it integrated. I don't see why not. I think that's fine. Even if you put it in stage 2, I don't know if pro players will use it right away unless it's just a really broken hero. But I think it's still a start and would still be good for viewership regardless, and a smart move.
Yeah,
So.
the sooner it gets into Overwatch League scrims, the better off they are. So
yeah,
very interested to see how that'll go.
Yeah, I mean, I think introducing a healer right now is actually a really great timing in that regard, because I think so much of what makes GOATs work as a meta is the insane amount of healing you get from the triple support. So if you can throw something in there that maybe shakes up the support meta just a little bit, then that might be enough to tip the balance away from quite as much GOATs as we've had so far.
Yeah, I agree. That'll definitely be interesting to watch moving forward. We've got a bunch of great games that happened in week 2. We've got a lot of more great ones coming in week 3. As you guys probably know by now, the Game Haus is a beat writer system where we're covering each of the games from each team's point of view with recaps. We're also doing feature pieces, interviews. Like Brandon said, he's putting out a ton of interviews. We've got all this on our website, thegamehaus.com. You can just click on Overwatch. There's little team tabs for everything. It's awesome. Seriously, go check it out. But without anything else, I think that's it for this episode of WatchHaus, guys. Brad, thank you so much, Shy Guy, for coming on. You've been an awesome guest. I think we'll probably be seeing you around here more in the future.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah. Brandon, thank you as well, always, for joining us.
Good to be back.
For sure. And Rob, thanks behind the scenes. I see you up there in the Discord call making it happen. Everyone else, thank you for the viewers. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for stopping by.
See ya.